creative energy. When we are taking part in this, we are part of this constant creating and becoming. And how can we allow our imagination and our creativity to express itself in our daily practices? Imagination and creativity are not exactly the same thing, they're related. Imagination is a mental characteristic that makes it possible for us to visualize new ideas, new concepts, things that we don't really perceive with our senses. So we see them with our mind's eye. Creativity then involves taking those visualizations and turning them into something. Anything. Do we all have imagination? How does it express itself? As Unitarian Universalists, can we use our imagination and our creativity to express our principles and our values in our everyday life? Hopefully the answer is yes. So come, let us explore some of these ideas. Let us practice together. And now we're going to sing our opening hymn, so please rise in body or spirit, and it is number 354, meditation and prayer. We begin by reading the joys and concerns that have been submitted in writing in our book for today, this morning of Mother's Day. The first was submitted by Paula Tallarico, and it says, Paula and Mike Tallarico are proud of their daughter Marie, who graduated from Berkeley Law School on May the 10th. So we know where she is. The next stop is New York City after studying for the bar exam. And the next one is also a joy. Thinking of the many aunts, neighbors, foster mothers who are mothers to the children in their lives. Our thanks go to them. When we contemplate joys and concerns every week, we realize that there are many joys and especially concerns that people have in their hearts, many sorrows that they cannot express in words or would prefer not to express in words. And we just need to look at our daily news items to know that there are many, many, many things happening in the world that break our hearts repeatedly. So for all of those, let us hold a few moments of silence to bear witness to them. And today, we will do a meditation on creativity. Let us begin by preparing our bodies and our minds. As we prepare our body, our mind will prepare itself as well. Let us sit comfortably, try to place our feet on the floor, relax our shoulders, and imagine that at the top of our heads, touch that creative universe all around us. Our hands may be in a meditative position or on our knees or wherever, but let's not clench them. Let's keep them relaxed. Our eyes don't need to be closed, but they may be sort of half-masked, unfocused as we enter our meditation. We will do a loving kindness meditation. Breathing in, we visualize those who create beauty in the world, those who create life. Breathing out, we think, may they be well. On our in-breath, we see those who make with their hearts and their minds. On the out-breath, we think, may they be well. Breathing in, we see those who make sense, and we see those who make do. May they all be well. On our in-breath, we think of those who bear, those who raise, and those who teach and help the children. On our out-breath, we think, may they be well. Let us breathe for a few more moments, breathing in and breathing out at our own pace. Amen, and blessed be. Well, today's message is about imagination. As our wayside pulpit says, imagine that. What is that? Whatever. It's our imagination, what we visualize. You know, there used to be, those of us who are older know this, there used to be a radio show with Art Linkletter that had a segment titled, Kids Say the Darndest Things. And they do. Small children are not daunted by such little things like not knowing the word for something or not knowing the origin of the universe alike. Nothing like that. They're very creative. In fact, they probably can tell you what the origin of the universe is if you ask them. My children were just like that when they were little. They said the darndest things. When she was 2 or 3, my daughter once said out of the blue when we were in the car, she said, "Where did the outside go?" She encountered many situations that were impossible to describe with her still very limited vocabulary. So she filled the gaps in between the words that she did know and the ones she didn't. She filled them with her still growing imagination. She described the situation at hand with the words that she already knew. So this word, this sentence, "Where did the outside go?" happened during an experience of driving into a tunnel on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. This was a long time ago when there were still lots of tunnels. And so it became a question allowing for many answers. Where did the outside go? The question invited the telling of an intriguing story by her parents to explain the idea of tunnels, which in turn was filled with mystery and revelation for kids and adults alike. It became like a spiritual reflection. And these situations come up quite often when we interact with children. Watching the tide come in at the seaside, that same child declared that the sea is growing up. And indeed it was. And her younger brother did the same thing in his toddler years. We lived in Washington, D.C. at the time. And, well, for one thing, there were lots of dogwood around in Washington. And one day, the parents who didn't have that much imagination were saying, "I wonder where that name comes from, dogwood." And we heard from the back seat, "Because it's covered with bark." Well, yeah, now we know. So at times, we would take the children to the city's museums, like the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum or the Portrait Gallery. And other times, we would go to the National Zoo. And one Sunday, my son asked, "Can we go to the painting zoo today?" The painting zoo. I seem to remember that we indulged his wish, and we did indeed go to the painting zoo that day, and the paintings were very well behaved. Small children often make meaning of situations using language in imaginative ways, and indeed they seem to possess an abundance of imagination. Theirs fits the clinical definition of imagination. They can form a conscious idea or a mental image of something they have never seen. And the definition, I got this out of the dictionary, it goes on to say, they can do this as though a synthesis of remembered elements of previous sensory experiences or ideas happen as modified by unconscious mechanisms. Stated more simply, young children have the capacity to fill in the spaces that exist between the things they can clearly see and understand. As adults, most of us find it harder to use our imagination to visualize things we cannot perceive with our five senses. We think, okay, that's something for artists. And indeed, many writers and other artists are said to use their imagination to fill gaps between the known, the familiar, the literal, and to create new worlds. A little while ago, I was reading about an artist by the name of Tim Klein. He had found an imaginative way of filling the spaces in between, quite literally, by putting together store-bought jigsaw puzzles. Because you know, they all have the same shape pieces. And that gave him an idea. Instead of filling empty spaces in a puzzle by sifting through the pieces and comparing them with the photo on the box, he makes use of the fact that puzzle pieces across puzzles have identical shapes. And he fills some of the shapes in one puzzle with pieces from another puzzle, yielding amazing works of art, like a train that becomes a horse in the front. And now, you know, when we look at that, we might say, I could have done that. And we often say that, you know, like when we see Jackson Pollock painting also, we say, well, I could have done that. In fact, I think I did. But yes, indeed. But we were not the first to let our imagination go there. And it's not as simple as it seems. I once tried to make a puzzle where I had New York City, and then I had palms in the Caribbean, so I was going to put a palm tree in New York City instead of the Empire State Building. But I'd made the mistake of having a puzzle that had 500 pieces or so. By the time I had finally figured out New York City, I thought, I'm not doing that other puzzle and then put them together in different ways. So I just gave the puzzles away. And besides, it wasn't my idea. It was Tim Klein's idea, so there. There's a much more exciting example. In 1981, they were going to erect a Vietnam War memorial on the mall in Washington, D.C. And Maya Lin, at that time, was a 21-year-old undergraduate art student at Yale University. She entered a public design competition for that new Vietnam Veterans Memorial to be erected on the Washington Mall. It is said that she also submitted it for a class project at Yale University. She received an unimpressive B. But hers was the winning design among 1,422 entries for the memorial. Her professor, they say, also submitted the design. His was not selected. Her stroke of imagination consisted of going in the opposite direction of what other monuments on the Washington Mall portrayed. Instead of the name and the statue of a president or a leader, she filled the empty spaces on the slab of polished black granite with the names of the Americans who had died during the Vietnam War. It is an incredible list. The memorial is one, maybe the most visited place on the Washington Mall, and it has become a pilgrimage site for families of those who have perished in wars, not just the Vietnam War, but in wars in general. It also is a pilgrimage for those reflecting on personal costs of war. Maya Lin's imaginative approach to the design competition, where she went in the direction opposite to that followed by others, is something that Unitarian Universalists have tended to have a reputation for. They're a little bit like that as a group. What will happen when we lean into or reconnect with our creative imagination, our creativity? Maybe we will get better at everyday organizing, solving problems like stewardship and stuff like that, that we always deal with at least once a year in our congregations. Maybe we will find new ways of connecting with the beauty of creation, like the flowers we have in our vase today. Sometimes we are called to reassemble something, like that puzzle of Tim Klein. Something that didn't quite fit, wasn't quite phrased perfectly. Or we're called to rearrange words to construct a better narrative, or to use pronouns in such a way that we acknowledge the actual personhood of all living and non-living things. And this is an exciting time to do just that. Next month, as Unitarian Universalists, we have been collectively tasked with creativeness, with creativity, to consider the new proposed changes in Article 2 of the UUA bylaws. And we have talked about these before. To some of it, it seemed like a daunting task to fill in empty, unfamiliar spaces between the things we know as UUs. We probably can see 3 things as known very well. We know our 7 or 8 principles, even though very few of us actually know them by heart. I challenge you and myself. Some of us keep them in our wallets so we can read them to people who might ask about them. But we also know that we are envisioning the thing that is the beloved community. And this is a good reminder to say that next month is the General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association, where they will vote on the bylaws. The final vote will take place. Not the bylaws, but just this Article 2. And if you want to be one of the delegates for that meeting, this is a good time to think about whether you want to do that, and let Joanne Heiso know if you do. I should tell you, it's all on Zoom, so you don't have to travel anywhere. Next year, it's going to be in Baltimore, in case you make longer plans. Recently, just 3 weeks ago, I attended the Regional Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association that took place in Madison, Wisconsin. I really didn't want to go. But when I did, and I heard the keynote address, I thought, this is really worth it, being here and hearing that. The keynote address was given by the president of the organization, Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt, together with the president of the United Church of Christ, the Reverend Dr. Karen Georgia Thompson. And these are some of the things they visualized and put into words in their keynote address. I'm using some of their words here. They talked about the ways in which we live in a globalized world, and yet the physical and the social world around us are closing up more and more. More walls, more restrictions, more boxes to fit in, fewer freedoms. I remember a time, and this was very irresponsible if I think about it now, thinking back to those little children. They used to be able to fly on airplanes by themselves to go to their grandparents. And the flight attendants would sort of keep an eye on them, we hoped. That doesn't happen anymore. Once I had a really bad experience because I'd forgotten that my children's names were on my passport. And sure, they could leave, but they didn't have that passport. And when they came back without papers, their parents were called in through security, and they thought, okay, we found some illegal aliens here. Luckily, we had our passports with us because we could have been in big trouble, and rightly so, thinking back on it. Anyway, those were some of the liberties people had in those times. Amidst all of this, here we are. Unitarian Universalism as a liberal religion in this environment of closing down. And it is not enough for us to say we stand on the side of love. We side for love, we say nowadays. Yes, we do, but what does that mean? And how do we express that in the way we interact with people, in the way we present ourselves as a group? It stands, our liberal voice stands for a number of specific things. It stands for indivisibility, and it also focuses on this worldliness. Now, these were people, one of the keynote speakers was the president of the United Church of Christ. And both presidents spoke about the need to focus on this side of the afterlife, if there is such a thing. On this world is what we need to focus on. This worldliness, as they called it. We need to be accountable to this life and what we do in it, what we do for others. We have to be willing and able to bear witness to what is happening and to do so from our values. We can't just say, oh, it's just a phase, we'll get through it. And we have to express who we are and what our values are and how we can live those values. Where do we find keeping such a liberal prophetic voice? Well, we do get inspiration in many places. Sometimes it's in the work of poets, like the work of Maya Angelou and Mary Oliver and Carl Sandburg and Langston Hughes. We also find it in the age-long social traditions like the commons. Not many people know anymore what the commons are, and that's a sign of our times, of that closing in and reducing access to things that should be free. The air, the forests, the land that animals graze on. And it shouldn't be free indiscriminately, like in factory farming. It should be organized by the people. So the commons, these commonly held resources like forests and rivers, we have to work for them. We have to be engaged with them. We have to take care of the commons so that we can return valuable things to it, to the commons. We also must be willing to talk with our liberal voices and find ways to have a more organized liberal voice. What do we have to say in the public square that disrupts the now common narratives that diminish people's humanity, the humanity of immigrants, of refugees, of the incarcerated, of the poor, who are made poor by the restrictive policies and ideologies to begin with? Our task is to put front and center that love that we profess, that love which is a liberating love, and which is at the core of our theological beliefs. So a little over a month from now at the General UU Assembly, Congregational delegates will vote on revisions to Article 2 of the bylaws, which will capture our values in 6 core values that are all interconnected and that have love at its center. And they are easy to remember. They are justice, equality, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. Will we be able to tap into our creativity as we address this task of voting on the bylaws? Can we tap into our imagination and creativity? May we make it so. Let us now rise in body or spirit as we sing our closing hymn. It is number 309, Earth is Our Homeland, in the Grey Hymnal, so that's number 309.